What would you do if, on an ordinary quiet evening, you walked into your child's room and found a swollen, angry red tattoo right below your 3-year-old's neck? You don't call the police because the one who did it was your husband's mother. And when you scream that she needs to be taken to court, your husband just says, "If you do this, our family will fall apart. My name is Ava." And that night, I chose to let it fall apart rather than stay silent. I still remember the soft amber glow from the nightlight as I stepped into my son's room after a long flight back from Colorado. He was asleep, running a slight fever. I leaned in to check his temperature, and then I saw it just beneath the collar of his pajamas. A dark purplish phoenix smeared with fresh ink, surrounded by swollen red skin. I stumbled back like I'd been burned. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I screamed, "What the hell is this? Who did this to him?" Ethan, my husband, rushed in. His face went pale. His voice shook. "Don't panic. It was my mom. She just wanted to welcome him in our family's way." It felt like I'd been pulled straight into a nightmare. My son, born from love, raised between two cultures, had been turned into a twisted symbol of some warped tradition from my husband's side of the family. I scooped him up. He whimpered in pain. The tattoo hadn't been covered. It hadn't been cleaned. Blood was seeping from the edge of the phoenix's wing. I couldn't breathe. "I'm pressing charges," I said. Ethan looked at me, conflicted but cold. "If you do that, I don't think this marriage will survive." I stared at him, unblinking. "Then you can leave this house, right now." And that was how it began. Not a simple family disagreement, but a war between motherhood and blind tradition, between one mother standing alone and a system that had been in place for generations. And I swore I would not let my child become its next victim. I used to think Ethan was just a guy with a rebellious taste in art. His body was covered in tattoos, from his wrists all the way down to his ankles, but never his neck or face. When we were dating, I used to joke, "Are you a walking color chart or what?" And he'd laugh and say, "In my family, the body is a sacred canvas." Back then, I thought it was just a poetic line, but I was wrong. The first time I met the Averys, I was stunned. The entire family, from the grandparents to the toddlers, was covered in tattoos, literally covered, and they didn't hide it. They flaunted it, like it was a badge of honor. One had a dragon stretching from cheek to forehead. Another had black wings inked across their entire back. Even a 5-year-old had the word legacy tattooed at the base of his neck. Their family portrait looked more like a rock album cover than a holiday card. I was the only one with clear, unmarked skin. No tattoos, no symbols, just pale, untouched flesh. And that made me stand out. They never said anything directly, but the looks were enough. I wasn't one of them. Marla, Ethan's mother, was always polite, but never warm. She'd hug Alana, Ethan's sister-in-law, who had tattoos running across her back and neck. She'd whisper sweet things into her ear. But with me, just a nod. A stiff, "Oh, come sit down." It always felt like I was a visitor, not part of whatever tightly bound system they had going on. Then I got pregnant, and the atmosphere shifted. Marla started stopping by more often, bringing over baked goods, maternity clothes, saying things like, "This baby will carry on our special bloodline." At the time, I thought she was just excited to be a grandmother, but now I see. It was a slow, calculated softening process, gentle, persistent. When I asked her about their so-called tattoo tradition, Marla smiled and said, "We never force anyone, but if someone truly belongs, they'll feel the urge." It sounded like a threat dressed up as kindness. I used to believe Ethan was the only normal one in that family. He always told me I'd never pressure you to get inked. He never once mentioned tattooing our child. We had agreed our son would decide for himself when he was older, but now, staring at the inflamed tattoo on my toddler's neck, I realized either Ethan lied to me or he was just as controlled by that system as the rest of them. I remember one Christmas dinner, Marla raised her glass and said to everyone at the table, "Tradition is in the blood. Not everyone born into this family is of this family." I gave a polite laugh back then. But now I'm trembling. This isn't just a weird family with a thing for tattoos. This is something darker, a hidden order where loyalty is carved in ink. And my son, he was dragged into it without a choice. A week before everything fell apart, my mother had a stroke. She lived in Boulder, Colorado, over 600 miles from our home. When I got the call, I barely had time to throw a few outfits into a suitcase before racing to the airport, heart pounding. Ethan was in the middle of a major corporate merger. It was crunch time. He couldn't leave Santa Fe to come with me, so we needed someone to watch our son. I called Marla as a last resort. She was never the type to volunteer for babysitting. There was always an excuse: back pain, yoga, or a meeting with her tattooed women empowerment circle. But that day, she answered right away. No hesitation. "Of course, I'll be right there," she said, her voice unusually calm. I should have known something was off. Marla showed up just 30 minutes after I called. I remember she wore a long-sleeve rust-colored blouse covering the wolf and Japanese ink patterns on her arms. As she stepped through the door, she said something I'll never forget. "Leave him with me. He'll learn where he belongs." I gave a forced laugh. In my head, I thought, as long as he's safe and on time for meals, I don't care what she says. I kissed my son goodbye. He waved his little hand, grinning ear to ear. "Come back soon, Mommy." A line that would later feel like a knife through my chest, because when I came back, that smile was gone. During the 3 days I was in Boulder, I kept checking in with Ethan. He told me everything was fine. Our son was eating and sleeping well. Marla, he said, was being surprisingly sweet. His exact words. Still, I had a strange feeling. But every time I asked for a video call, Marla would brush it off. "He's sleeping right now," or "He's in the bath." Then, on the 3rd day, I called home. Ethan picked up. He paused for a few seconds, too long. Then he said, "Ava, I think you should come home. It's not an emergency, but I don't want to talk about it over the phone." It felt like a boulder had dropped on my chest. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear. I left Boulder that very night. I drove through the darkness on I-25, hands trembling the entire way. One thought kept screaming in my head, what happened to my child? I got home at 3 a.m. The nightlight in my son's room was still glowing. Ethan stood at the door, pale as a ghost. I pushed past him and walked in. And there he was, sleeping on his side, and on the back of his neck, a deep indigo phoenix tattoo. The lines were crooked, the skin was swollen and red. No bandage, no antiseptic, just raw, inked flesh on a 3-year-old child. I couldn't even scream. There was no air left in my lungs. Ethan's voice cracked behind me. It was my mom. She thought it was her way of welcoming him into the family. Welcoming him or scarring him, turning his body into proof of their delusion. I was shaking as I leaned down and cradled him. He whimpered from the pain, and in that moment, I knew. I wasn't a wife trying to keep the peace anymore. I was a mother, and I would protect my son, no matter the cost. I carried my son out of that room like the house was on fire. He stirred awake, his eyes red and puffy with sleep, and whimpered, "Mommy, it hurts." I held him tighter, trying not to let my tears fall on his cheeks, but my chest felt like it was being punched from the inside. Each heartbeat was a cut. How did this happen? How could someone who calls herself Grandma do this to a child? Ethan followed behind, stammering, Wait, Ava, I think it might just be a mild skin reaction. Maybe the ink didn't agree with him." Or, I spun around, every word sharp as a blade. "Are you seriously defending your mother right now?" He went silent. I strapped my son into the back seat, wrapped a towel around his neck, and drove straight to the 24-hour urgent care. It was almost 4 a.m. Santa Fe air was freezing, but my hands were sweating, trembling uncontrollably. The doctor took one look at the tattoo and sighed. "Looks like this was done with a makeshift needle. No sterilization. We'll need to clean the area and treat it for infection immediately." I asked, "Will it leave a scar?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "We'll do everything we can, but scarring is very likely." I bit down on my lip, not because of the scar itself, but because of the truth it carried. My son would wear this mark for the rest of his life, not by choice, but because an adult decided his body wasn't his own. When we got back home, Ethan tried to speak. I ignored him. As I rifled through the drawer looking for his insurance card, my hand hit something small, a shattered ceramic bowl, a gift Marla gave us at the baby shower. Inside one of the broken pieces, was a tiny SD card. I froze, staring at it. Why would she hide this inside a gift? Ethan was still sitting at the dining table, fists clenched. I turned to him, my voice low, dead calm, like a declaration of war. "I'm pressing charges, not just for the tattoo, but because she violated our son's body, deliberately, dangerously, and without consent." He shook his head. "If you go through with this, there's no coming back for this marriage." I looked into the eyes of the man who used to be my husband, my best friend, the one who once swore to protect this child with me. "Then you're free to pack your things, anytime." That night, Ethan called Marla over a dozen times. She didn't answer. She disappeared. No texts, no calls, no trace. And I knew she had planned this. The only question was, how long had Ethan known? And what was he staying silent for? The anger inside me was no longer panic. It was crystal clear focus. The kind a mother gets when she knows she has to take back control. This fight was just getting started. 3 days after I filed the report, social media exploded. I woke up to over 20 messages, 5 missed calls, and a post going viral across every local parenting group. The post came from a familiar name, Marla Avery. Her profile photo was in black and white, eyes looking teary. The caption read, "As a grandmother, all I ever wanted was for my grandchild to feel loved. But maybe I went too far. Now my daughter-in-law is threatening to take me to court." The comments flooded in with sympathy. "You did nothing wrong, Marla. Family tradition is sacred. Don't let outsiders tear your bloodline apart." I read each line with trembling hands. No one asked how my child was doing. No one cared that he was still on antibiotics, still swollen, still waking up crying at night. In their eyes, there was only one victim, the misunderstood grandma. A few hours later, I got a text from Sarah, Ethan's younger sister. "Ava, can you not escalate this? The family's really on edge. Mom's in the hospital, heart issues." I didn't reply, but by that evening, I noticed something worse. I was being quietly cut off from every support system I had. The clinic called asking to re-verify our insurance records due to a third-party report of conflicting health claims. My son's preschool suddenly paused our pickup access. No explanation. The local mom groups I used to be part of, they started hiding my posts. Some even flagged my account as disruptive. That night, Ethan walked into the living room with his phone in hand, face tense. "Did you seriously message everyone we know? Calling my mom a psycho?" I looked him dead in the eye. I told the truth. That's the only way I know how to protect our son. He didn't respond, but as he turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of his screen. A message notification. "Let it go. I'll handle it." And I knew. I wasn't just up against one unhinged grandmother. I was facing an entire network, a legacy family system built on silence, loyalty, and denial. The next morning, I stopped by the pharmacy to pick up meds for my son. As I stood in line, I saw her, Marla, just a few feet away. She glanced at me, then looked away like I was a stranger, pretending not to see me. But her hand shook as she signed the receipt. That same shake, I'd seen it before, in the jagged ink on my son's skin. I snapped. Right there in the pharmacy, I yelled, "Who do you think you are? You branded my child and now you stand there pretending to be innocent?" Heads turned. Phones came out. A clerk stammered, "Ma'am, please, keep your voice down." Marla looked at me with tear-filled eyes and a soft voice. I just wanted him to feel welcomed. I'm sorry if I hurt anyone." It hit me in the chest, not because of the words, but because of how perfectly she performed them. A woman near the counter whispered, "Poor lady, look at that daughter-in-law." In their eyes, I became the hysterical mom. When I got home, there was an email from my employer. "We regret to inform you that your contract is being suspended due to personal matters affecting your job performance." And I knew exactly who was behind this. This wasn't just me versus Marla anymore. This was me, standing for the truth, against a web of twisted loyalty, fake love, and inherited control. I thought losing my job was rock bottom, but that was just the beginning. The next day, my son's preschool called. His teacher said they needed to update the emergency contact form. I told her, "Just list me and Ethan," but she hesitated, then said, "The thing is, our system shows Marla Avery as the primary contact. She's also the only one who provided his allergy information." I froze. Back home, I tore through our files. The allergy card, vaccination schedule, pediatrician forms, all gone. I remembered filing them after his last wellness check. Marla had been there that day too. She must have taken them, quietly, piece by piece, and no one noticed. I called the pediatric clinic. At first, they said they couldn't locate my son's records. Then the doctor called back, his voice cautious. "We've received concerns about potential psychological distress caused by a parent. We've been advised not to release further information without a court order." A parent. They meant me, the mother, the one who had taken him to every appointment since birth. I had officially lost access to my own child's medical history. That night, I didn't sleep. I started retracing everything. Old baby monitor footage, archived messages, every little clue. Then I remembered. Months ago, Marla had asked me how to use cloud storage. She said she wanted to check out smart home designs. I didn't think much of it. I'd shown her everything. When I logged back into the home monitoring app, I saw she had upgraded the storage plan. Videos going back more than 6 months. I scrolled for hours, my eyes burning from exhaustion, until I found it. 2:00 a.m. A video from exactly 1 week ago. Marla was standing over my son's crib, whispering something. The audio was faint, but still audible through the mic. "You're about to become part of the family. Just like your dad, just like everyone else." I clutched my head. My heart cracked open. Proof, but also pain beyond words. The next morning, I brought the footage to our scheduled couples therapy session, but the moment I sat down, I sensed something was off. Dr. Lyman, our usually calm, measured therapist, started flipping through his notepad, then asked me one question after another, cold and clinical. "Do you often feel like you're being watched? Have you ever lost control in front of your child? Do you feel the need to isolate yourself from your in-laws to feel safe?" I answered them one by one, but the longer it went on, the more I felt like I was on trial, not in therapy. At the end, he said gently, "You might consider independent evaluation for parenting within high-conflict environments." On the way out, I overheard the receptionist talking on the phone. "That Ava woman, yeah, rumor is her mother-in-law's dating Dr. Lyman's brother." I couldn't believe it. Even our therapist had been pulled into Marla's orbit. That night, my son asked me a question that broke me. "Mommy, why does Grandma's drawing hurt so much? She said Daddy wanted it too." I turned to Ethan. He looked down, silent. No need to ask further. I knew. He'd known, maybe for a long time, and he'd stayed quiet. I looked at my child, at the raw red skin still healing on his neck, and I knew if I didn't act now, I would lose everything. Not by screaming, not by rage, but through the law, through the truth, and through the unwavering courage of a mother who refuses to back down. Monday morning, a thick envelope sat on my doorstep. No return address. I opened it. Bold black letters stared back at me. Notice of civil suit, defamation of character, filed by Marla Avery. I laughed, not because it was funny, but the bitter kind of laugh you give when you realize you've stepped into a game that's rigged for you to lose. Page by page, I read through her accusations that I fabricated lies, slandered their family traditions, and caused her severe emotional distress. Attached were screenshots, my posts, my private messages to friends, and the pharmacy video of me yelling at her. While I was still in shock, Marla went live, sitting in her living room, blood pressure cuff on her arm, hands trembling, eyes glassy. "I'm not a young woman anymore. My heart is weak. All I wanted was to leave something behind for my grandchildren. But now, my daughter-in-law is trying to destroy everything." I picked up my phone, watched the share count skyrocket. Hundreds of comments flooded in as if on script. "We believe you, Grandma. Family values matter. That daughter-in-law should be ashamed." She was rewriting the entire narrative, turning me into the crazy control freak mom. An hour later, I got an email from my son's preschool. Effective immediately, Ava Meyer is temporarily restricted from school pickup duties pending incident review. I called. All I got was a recorded message. "We are unable to comment on an active civil case." I drove straight to Marla's house, not to start a fight, but to understand what the hell she was saying. As I stepped out of the car, a neighbor's Ring camera swiveled toward me. A window creaked open. Someone shouted, "There she is! Go live!" I turned and ran. I knew what was happening. They were turning me into the stalker, the woman harassing a poor, defenseless grandma the whole neighborhood adored. A few hours later, an anonymous account posted a clip from that same Ring camera. Me, standing on Marla's porch, fists clenched, jaw tight. No audio, just a caption. "This woman is so obsessed she's threatening an elderly lady because of a tattoo." I scrolled through the comments, each one like a punch to the ribs. "She doesn't deserve to be a mother. If I were that kid, I'd run to Grandma's house. That night, I turned on the TV just to distract myself, but there it was. A Santa Fe family dispute is drawing attention. A grandmother is accused by her daughter-in-law of unauthorized tattooing, while the grandmother insists it was a cultural misunderstanding. Authorities are still investigating. I buried my face in my hands. Everything was spiraling beyond control. The final blow came the next morning. Ethan. He walked into the kitchen, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking as he placed a letter on the table. The court's asking both sides to prepare documents for a preliminary hearing. Ava, do you realize what this means? I looked at him. Yes, it means our son is about to be caught in the middle of something that should never have happened. He nodded. Then quietly, if you drop the charges, Mom said she'll take down the posts. She'll pay for tattoo removal and walk away. I stared at him, like I was truly seeing him for the first time. You think this ends with deleting a post and erasing a mark? I just want things to go back to the way they were, he murmured. I let out a hollow laugh. Back to when our child hadn't been branded. Because you stayed silent. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about protecting my son anymore. I had to fight, to hold on to who I was. Through media spin, legal manipulation, and the weaponization of blood ties, I had already lost so much. My job, my reputation, trust, and almost my son. But there was one thing I still had, the truth. And I knew if I wanted to save my son, I had to turn the truth into evidence. 3 weeks after being countersued, I called the only person left I could trust, Frank Delaney, a retired forensic investigator. He used to work with my father when Dad was still chief of police in Denver. I remembered him from my childhood, a stern man with a steel voice and eyes like ice. But when I called, his voice was softer than I remembered. Ava, your dad always said you were the toughest one in the family. I nearly broke down, not because of the compliment, but because, for the first time in months, someone wasn't asking me, "Are you sure you're not just being paranoid?" We met at a small roadside cafe off 12th Street. I didn't say much, just handed him a flash drive with the baby monitor footage. Photos of my son's inflamed tattoo, a timeline of the missing medical files, screenshots of Marla's online activity. He took everything, studied it carefully, then said, "You're not just up against a person, you're up against a power structure she's built over 30 years. I nodded, clutching my coffee cup tight. But the thing about structures built on manipulation, he added, they all have cracks. We started tracing the paper trail. Frank advised me to reach out to former employees at the tattoo shop Marla used to frequent. I posed as a potential client, asked about appointments. After a few minutes of small talk, one of the staff, his name was Cody, let something slip. Marla? Yeah, she brought a kid here once. Boss refused to do it, said the kid was way too young. She got mad and stormed out. The next week, we got hit with a surprise health inspection. I clenched my teeth. Marla didn't just pressure people. She punished them for saying no. Frank suggested checking security footage from the parking lot nearby. By some miracle, the maintenance guy there was a retired vet, someone who had once worked with my dad, too. When I explained the situation, he nodded and said, "The system overwrites every 30 days, but I keep backups for technical review. I'll check." 3 days later, he sent me a clip. There she was, Marla, holding my son, walking into a nameless, unmarked tattoo parlor at 9:43 p.m. No Ethan, no me, just her and my little boy. My hands trembled as I paused the video. Right at the moment she pulled down his collar and pointed to the back of his neck, My son's head slumped forward, asleep or drugged. I sent the clip to my attorney. He called back immediately. "Ava, this is big, but we need more. Purchase records, medical documentation, witness testimony." I exhaled slowly. "We'll get all of it. I'm not stopping." Frank wasn't just a retired investigator anymore. He became my ally. Every evening we sat together, piecing together timelines, matching receipts, flagging what would hold up in court. The deeper we dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a dysfunctional family. This was a system, one built on abuse of power, manipulation of communities, and the violation of minors, all in the name of tradition. And if they wanted to keep playing that game, then they'd play it by the law. And this time, the law was on my side. 1 week after the parking lot footage was filed into evidence, I received an anonymous message. Just 4 words. "Initiation. This Saturday." And I knew exactly what it meant. The Avery family had an annual tradition, a private initiation ceremony where children deemed of age were marked to symbolize full membership in the bloodline. This year, it was Aiden's turn, my sister-in-law's son, 4 years old, and I knew if I did nothing, another child would carry scars for life. I called my attorney. He hesitated. "Ava, you have no legal right to enter a private gathering unless you're invited." I looked him straight in the eye. "I don't need an invitation. I need the truth." And this time, I had the truth in my hands. The ceremony was held at the matriarch's estate, a Spanish-style mansion on the outskirts of Santa Fe, a place that had never once acknowledged me as part of the family. As I walked through the gate, every head turned, as if they'd just seen a ghost. I stepped into the center of the backyard, where tables were set, relatives were gathered, and I hit play on my phone's speaker. The baby monitor footage. Marla carrying my son into an illegal tattoo shop. My child, groggy, barely conscious. The entire yard fell silent. I spoke loud, clear, so no one could pretend they didn't hear. This is evidence. This is the truth. And if anyone here dares bring another child into this twisted ritual tonight, I swear none of us will see our grandchildren again. Marla emerged from the porch, face pale as death. "You don't understand," she said. "This is about bonding. Tradition isn't something you judge with cameras and modern laws." I let out a cold laugh. Modern law is the only thing standing between children and the blindness of adults. She opened her mouth to respond, but a voice interrupted her from behind, a frail, familiar voice. "And what about the tradition of betrayal, Marla?" Heads turned. My grandmother, Eleanor Hayes, 82 years old, leaning on a cane, the only one in my family who had always stayed neutral. I hadn't seen her since my father's funeral. I had no idea she was in New Mexico. She handed me an envelope. Inside are financial records from the Avery Cultural Alliance, the organization Marla runs that receives nearly $500,000 a year in cultural preservation grants. I worked with an independent auditor, and I know that money didn't go to education. It went to tattoos. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I opened the envelope. Bank statements, ink supply invoices, payments for apprentice training, all labeled under cultural development. My grandmother continued, "You once told your mother, if the Avery family ever tried to consume you, you'd come find me. So here I am with $2 million from the Hayes Family Trust, enough to hire attorneys, doctors, experts, and, if necessary, the media." My lips trembled. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, sweetheart. Just win." Marla collapsed into a chair. The mask shattered. And for the first time, I wasn't Ava, the invisible daughter-in-law of the Avery clan. I was the one holding the proof, the support, and now, the power. This fight was no longer mine alone. I had allies, and this time, I would not let another child be harmed again. I used to think I'd have to beg in court just to keep my son. But today, I was standing in the Avery family's backyard, phone in hand, live streaming, looking straight into the camera. If you're watching this, know that this isn't just my story. This is for every child who was ever forced to wear something they didn't understand, just so the adults could feel connected. I panned the camera over to a long table. 4 little kids sat quietly, each wearing a black robe, their necks exposed. It looked like some twisted graduation ceremony. Among them was Aiden, Marla's great-grandson. The boy I knew would walk out of here with a mark on his skin and a scar on his soul. "Turn that off," someone yelled. "Ethan." He charged toward me, but I was ready. Across the yard, my attorney, Mr. Grant, walked through the main gate alongside 2 local reporters. A family security guard tried to stop them, but Grant raised a court-issued notice, a temporary injunction against any physical initiation acts involving minors filed by the district attorney's office. And then the police arrived. 2 patrol cars pulled up to the curb. An officer stepped forward, speaking clearly. "We've received reports of possible bodily harm to minors at this address. All marking rituals are suspended until further investigation." Marla stormed out, a far cry from the sweet grandma she played on camera. She screamed, "This is tradition. This is my property." "Who gave you the right?" I held my phone closer. "You once said, 'I just want them to feel like they belong.' So let me ask you again. Do children belong, or are they owned?" Ethan stood frozen. I looked at him one last time. No anger, no hope left to salvage anything. "I used to think you were just your mother's victim, but now I see you were part of the silence that kept this alive for far too long." He didn't answer, just lowered his eyes. While police began searching the premises, my grandmother, Eleanor, handed printed financial documents to the reporters, along with anonymous complaints from 3 other families whose children had also been pressured into being tattooed. The reporters' eyes lit up. They knew. This wasn't just news, it was a bomb. I knelt beside Aiden, 4 years old, shaking with fear. I gently pulled the robe off his shoulders and held his little hand. "You don't have to do anything to earn love. You are already enough. You're the most precious thing here, not something to be carved into your skin." He nodded, eyes glassy. I turned back to the camera. The live stream was still running. Over 18,000 people were watching. If you're a parent watching this, let me say one thing. You have the right to protect your child from anything that tradition tries to force onto them. Tradition is never more important than a child's freedom and safety. I ended the stream. No more words needed, because in that moment, I knew this fight. I had just won the first battle. After the live stream, the media exploded like a slow-burning bomb. 3 hours later, the video had over 2 million views. News outlets ran headlines like, "The tattoo tradition cult disguised as family loyalty. A terrifying truth uncovered." National TV crews began arriving in Santa Fe. My lawyer received a call from the New Mexico State Child Protection Commission. They launched a formal investigation, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't seen as an unhinged mother. They gave me a new name, the Whistleblower Mom. The Avery family unraveled faster than I could have imagined. Marla was summoned to an emergency hearing. No more tears, no more live streams, no more blood pressure cuffs or fragile performances. Just a woman in a white room, facing justice, facing her own decisions. The financial records my grandmother uncovered became the core of the case. They showed that Marla used over 80% of her tradition funds to hire unlicensed tattoo artists, purchase illegal supplies, and pay off family members to stay silent. Add to that a signed statement from Ethan. He formally removed his name from all joint accounts with his mother and granted me full custody of our son. We don't talk anymore. We don't argue either. What needed to be said was already spoken through action. Marla didn't go to prison, but she was issued a lifetime no-contact order with minors, forced into mandatory psychological treatment, and banned from attending any school, community event, or children's gathering for the next 10 years. The entire Avery family tradition was reclassified by authorities as a form of ritualized bodily harm. Her social media shut down, her foundation's website taken offline. The empire she built in 30 years collapsed in 30 days. And yet, even in victory, I didn't feel relief. I lost friends. I lost colleagues. They didn't attack me outright. They just drifted away. Silent elevators, avoiding eye contact at the preschool, whispers I caught while grocery shopping with my son. Some thought I went too far, some agreed with me, but believed I should have kept it in the family. My son still wakes up from nightmares. He dreams of the dragon scratching his neck. One night, he screamed, "Grandma, stop drawing. I don't want to be in the family." I held him for hours. He couldn't fall back asleep. I started taking him to weekly therapy sessions. His counselor said we needed to rebuild his sense of body autonomy. That's small things, like letting him choose his clothes, his meals, his stickers, could help him regain trust that his body belongs to him. I also joined a support group, parents who had been manipulated or gaslit by in-laws. And strangely enough, I wasn't alone anymore. We shared stories that never made the news, scars that never showed on skin, and victories no one ever celebrated. I'm not the woman I used to be. Not Ava who kept the peace. Not Ava who stayed quiet to keep the family intact. I am Ava, the mother who broke a cycle, the woman who gave her child back the right to choose, and stood for all the children who never got the chance to say no. 2 years after the trial ended, I left New Mexico and moved to Seattle, not to run away, but to start over in a place where no one knew me as the daughter-in-law who exposed her in-laws. My apartment was on the 6th floor of an old building overlooking Lake Union. Every morning, I woke up to the smell of home-brewed coffee and the sound of streetcars clinking down the road. No more emergency calls with lawyers. No more headlines, no more whispers, just me and my son, and a life. Imperfect, but real. Zayden is 5 now. He still has a faint scar on his neck, shaped like a dragon. But he doesn't ask about removal anymore. One day, he looked up at me and said, "Mom, can I call it my survival mark?" I nodded, holding him tight. Yes, and it's something to be proud of. We've started building new traditions, not rituals, not vague pledges of loyalty, but real, simple things. Friday night story time, Sunday mornings cooking Japanese tamago rolls, a recipe my mom once taught me, and once a month, Zayden picks a new temporary tattoo. A superhero, a dolphin, a bright pink butterfly. He sticks them on his arms, his legs, even his cheeks, wherever he wants. And when they fade, I ask him, "Want to wear the same one again?" "Nope, I'll pick a new one. I like choosing. So do I. I've gone back to school, studying child psychology, not to seek revenge, but to turn pain into protection for other children who need it. I've begun sharing my story at parenting workshops, in support groups, on my own podcast. No drama, no crying, just truth, and the ways we rebuild from it. One day, I received a letter. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. Ava, thank you for not sending me to prison. I was wrong, deeply wrong, but I'm starting to understand. Love cannot live where control exists. If Zayden allows it, I hope to see him again, not to claim him, but to apologize. It was signed, Marla. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I showed it to Zayden. He read it carefully, then sat quietly for a moment and asked, "If I see her, can I say no if I don't want to hug her?" I smiled. "You always have the right to say no. That's something I want you to remember forever. Some scars will fade, some memories won't. But if we let them mark our courage instead of our pain, they're not wounds anymore. They're proof that we stood up and protected what we believed in. I don't want revenge anymore. I just want my son to grow up knowing his body is his choices are his, and real love never asks for pain in return. And if I had to start over again and again, I would still choose to be a mother, not a daughter-in-law."